Hey everybody, my name is Chris Sheng and I'm the CEO and founder of Leader Pro. I'm also hosting today's episode with Greg Muzzillo, who is the founder of Proforma. Uh, you've been a founder of Proforma for decades now, but would love for you to share what it is that you guys do. It's a very sizable company in terms of what you've grown it into. I'm very curious around diving into that part of the journey. But before we do that, why don't you just tell us, give us some context around what it is that you guys do?
Sure. Chris, thanks for having me and happy to share my founder's journey because I think being a founder can be a lonely path. And I think sometimes it's just good to hear other people's stories. Sometimes, as I say to people, it's just good to know what you're experiencing is normal. And so
Yeah,
long story short, this is a business I started in 1978, 1 year after graduating from college with and I will get into the details later,
sure.
but with a couple $100 investment in a phone answering machine and some stationery, and grew it over the years to what is today a $700 million company with 600 franchise offices selling printing and promotional products primarily throughout North America, although we do ship a lot overseas. So commercial printing, which would include custom packaging, brochures and tags and corporate stationery and direct mail and everything with ink on it, and promotional products, branded giveaway type items, imprinted hard goods like pens and all kinds of coffee mugs and drinkware, etc., and then branded apparel, um, hats and shirts and aprons and uniforms. So pretty much anything custom printed, anything branded, is the industry that we are in. And our path to the market is that we have franchise-owned offices and we also have affiliates, opportunities for affiliates to kind of dip their toe in the water for only $500 and find out if this is right for them.
Very cool. Uh, Super interesting business. And I'm curious as to how you got started. What was if you can recall, the moment of the business idea and why did you decide that this was the thing for you to do straight out of college, pretty much, versus like going to take the 9 to 5?
Yeah, yeah. So when I graduated from college, I was number one in my class in accounting, and I went to work for what was then one of the big eight CPA firms, and that was the place you wanted to be. If you were a
Yep.
great accountant, you wanted to be with the big eight. I was on the General Motors audit and the American Electric Power audit, and what I found out very quickly was I loved studying accounting, and I hated doing it. I just hated it. And I had a buddy from college that worked for a small distributor. I didn't really even know what he did, quite honestly. But we would go out on Friday nights after we graduated from school and looking for dates for Saturday night. And we would eventually get around to complaining. He would complain about his boss and he didn't like the company, and I would complain about accounting. But the more I listened to what he did, it was fascinating to me because when you study accounting, you mostly think everybody makes everything that they sell because you learn cost accounting. But they learned about this distribution industry where they would just go out and get orders for printing and similar type items and then send it to one of hundreds of suppliers that primarily only sell through distributors. And then the manufacturer would put the distributor's label on the goods, send it to the customer, bill the distributor bill the customer, and the margins were crazy. He was telling me about $50,000 orders with $20,000 in profit, $80,000 orders with $35,000 in profit, just phenomenal margins. And I thought to myself, I think for many people that just would have been a Friday night, several Friday nights complaining about careers. But for me, who I wanted to own my own business ever since I was a kid. I was one of those kids that had a paper out, mowed lawn, shovel
Yep.
snow, and
Awesome.
I always wanted to own my own business anyhow. And it got accelerated though because I didn't realize how much I didn't like accounting. And so as I listened to him, I said, "Wait a minute, we can do this. You know the products and the business. I know accounting. Let's do this." And so really within a couple of months, we graduated in July, and really by November, we had decided to do this.
Got it. And I guess like walk us through like what it was like going from making that decision to do it to realizing you have a viable business. Granted, obviously, this is a business model that others were already doing, so it's somewhat proven. But in terms of like the size and scope of what you've grown it into, that's not typical, right? So like what were the different, I guess, like evolutions, maybe in the earlier stages, and maybe you didn't know that it was going to become this kind of a behemoth, and I'm sure you went through multiple cycles in these decades, but yeah, the first like few years, kind of getting it started,
Sure.
when did you start seeing some traction of this? Is like we have a path to being something big, if at all yet.
Well, think about it. Every business in North America buys some of what we sell. And more importantly, they run out and have to order more. And it's all custom printed, so the margins are relatively defensible. Now, I'm telling you stuff I learned along the way. I didn't know
Yeah.
this. I was just so starving to own any business. He could have been having a doggy doo-doo cleanup business. I don't know. I was just ready to own my own business. So anyhow, well, I told the CPA firm I was leaving in December, and they said, "Well, Greg, we invested a lot of money in you. We need you to see us through the busy season." So I did. And so my partner got started in January, 6 months after we had graduated. I saw the CPA firm through the busy season as they asked me to. And then I started in June. And I'm glad I helped them out because they eventually became our auditors. Uh,
Okay.
but it's just a lot of wearing out shoe leather. It wasn't very sophisticated. I'm sure now as I look back on it, there were far better ways of finding customers, but we were just doing things the old-fashioned way because it's what he taught me, doing what's called field calling. Of course, this was way before COVID, just going into businesses, walking up and down business corridors and business suburban parks, walking in, asking the receptionist who buys the printing and promotional products, seeing if the buyer will see you or at least getting their name, and just wearing out shoe leather. And so through a great deal of hard work in those first couple of years, by 1983 or 84, we had made the Inc. magazine, INC
Yep.
magazine.
Yep.
They publish a list. Now it's of the 5,000 fastest growing businesses, but back then it was only 500. And we
Mm.
made that list 3 years in a row um,
Wow.
of being the fastest growing business. And it's the kind of business that can grow that way because you go out and get some customers and in that first year, and then you get some customers, and then they start running out of the stuff, and they're
Yep.
during reorders while you're out in the next year trying to get more customers. So it kind of builds
Yep.
on itself. And so then we wanted to open up. So we were in Cleveland, Ohio. We want to open up a sales office, and we went to Columbus, Ohio to open up our first sales office. And long story short, after a number of interviews and a number of trips to Columbus, we went down to hire and train our first sales manager of our first remote office. And when we got there, the young fella said, young by today, my standards today,
Yeah.
our age back then, he said, guys, I just can't do this. He says, the more I learn about you guys, he says, I want to do what you did. I want to own my own business. And so he turned us down. And that was failure. And it really bothered me because I thought, good gravy, where did we go wrong here interviewing him? But more importantly, I thought, okay, so I'm not the only person my age that wants to own their own business. And I thought to myself, how could we have
Mm.
turned our infrastructure, relatively fledgling still at 5 or 6 million, but how could we have turned the, the infrastructure that we had into an opportunity for him to own his own business and yet be aligned with us?
Mm.
And that was a year of thinking and researching and but it was one of the best failures we ever had because it eventually led us to franchising. And
Yep.
so in 1986, we started franchising the business because of that failure, forced us, at least gave me the opening and the idea to find a different way and a better way.
Yeah. I kind of want to still go back a little bit to the wearing out the leather part of it, because I
Sure.
feel like that is something that I've noticed amongst today's entrepreneurs, that the skin is not as thick as it used to be, or
Oh,
the leather is not as thick as it used to be. Where,
well,
like I don't
yeah,
know if you've noticed that generationally speaking, but
yeah,
like at that time when you're going door to door, essentially knocking on office doors, trying to work your way and weave your way into decision makers of the buyers, like, I mean, I'm sure maybe I don't know if they were nicer back then, or if they met you with the same amount of grief around a salesperson coming in through the door. But I'm sure it was
well,
still very challenging. And how did you, coming from your space of like being an accountant and then not having necessarily to deal with rejection or face to face encounters like that, and putting yourself out there in a certain way,
yeah,
feel
yeah.
confident in that, right? Because I feel like, or was that even something you even thought about?
You know, number one, I never doubted I'd be very successful. And I think that's important for every entrepreneur. Never doubt yourself.
Mm,
Be confident in your own abilities. And I'm a big believer in the law of attraction. And
mm,
I think if you're not confident in yourself, the people that you're talking to, prospective customers or prospective employees, they're going to sense that. They're going to sense it. We bad vibration. We talk about people having good vibes or bad vibes. So I was always confident that we'd be successful, but I was met with the wide array of reception that you would imagine. Some people were very nice and open. Some people were mean and nasty and everything in between. But failure wasn't an option. My mom, when I told her I was going to leave the CPA firm and this job I had worked for 4 years to get, she asked me if I was crazy. And a
yeah,
lot of other
but,
people similarly. I think you just can't listen to people.
mm,
There's a lot of people, entrepreneurs in general, I think tend to look for affirmation and confirmation that they've got a good idea. But for a lot of reasons that people don't necessarily understand, not everybody is going to be encouraging to them. Some people don't understand what it is that they're doing. And so might be pretty negative. Other people might be intimidated, like,
mm,
wow, if that guy's successful, if that friend of mine is successful, and someday he pulls into his driveway with a new Mercedes, my wife's going to be asking me, what's wrong with us, right? So some people, maybe out of jealousy or fear, don't give you the right information. The key, the right encouragement. So looking for encouragement and confirmation isn't always the best thing to do. But failure wasn't an option. We had
mm,
an apartment, we had rent to pay, um, and by gosh, we were just going to make it. And since everybody buys what we sell,
yeah,
the math had to work out. At any point in time, every business in North America, probably 80 to 90% are happy who they're buying from. And so they're not open to talking to you. It's not personal. Rejection's never personal in business.
yeah,
But 1 to 2 out of 10 or 10 to 20% are open, not happy with their current source of supply or whatever it might be. And so, we played that math. And so 10 to 20% of the people that we would call on eventually gave us opportunities and eventually order with us. But it takes an absolute tenacity and an ability to put up with rejection and not take it personally. And I think most people take no way too personally. And when I teach
absolutely.
sales and success today, I tell people no doesn't mean no. No doesn't mean no. No means not yet. There's a
Mm,
huge difference because, and I try to tell this when I talk to kids in school or whatever. I say, listen, you're the same way. Like if I would ask kids, how many of you are in the market to buy a new car?
yeah,
Maybe. Well, maybe 1 or 2 out of 50
yeah,
people are in but how many of you will be in the market to buy a new car in 5 years? And they'll all raise their
yeah,
hands, right? So
yeah,
the answer, no, they're not in the market today, isn't no, never. It's just not yet. So
yep.
people have to learn how to not take rejection personally.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's number one, very true. So you mentioned 2 points. One, which is not taking it personally, and the other one was about confidence. And to me, that kind of roots back to self-awareness, or lack of self-awareness, right? So I think the confidence comes from, I feel for you when where your confidence came from was like you knew the math, and so you knew that at some point you just need to get to enough yeses. And it might take 1,000 no's, but if you get to 50 yeses out of those 1,000, or whatever the metrics were, the conversion percentages were, but whatever that was, that at some point it's going to flip. And and you knew you're willing to put in the effort. And I think where a lot of, you know, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, right? And it's like almost any creative endeavors, statistically speaking, like every business, like brand new business owner, it's almost as if I go and tell you I want to be the next big actor, like only a fraction of those that set out to do it at any given point in time will actually reach that level. And I'm talking about just for businesses to reach the point of 3 years of existence, it's less than 10%, right? And so
I don't know the math, but I
oh
believe
yeah,
you.
yeah, it's less than 10%. I think it's closer to like 5% that actually survive past 3 years, from creation. And that being said, it's there to weed out those that are not necessarily even strong enough, but like I think it's getting to that point of awareness. And a lot of times, what I've seen, especially in the tech world, is like people end up wanting to build things or like do build like a business without having a business first, which is like getting the customers, or getting the customer feedback. And you mentioned through the rejection, through failures, that you knew that failure wasn't an option. But I also feel like failure is a learning exercise. So you also probably learned like what kind of customers and are probably a better fit for you guys in the earlier days.
For
You also
sure.
probably realize how to handle objections, and like when somebody gives you a redirect, how to kind of ask a different question in a different way to get back into the sales conversation. So I'm sure you learned all these little things. Was that more intuitive for you and your partner, or was it something you guys were like willing to learn? Is my question. And for those that like maybe it's not intuitive in their DNA,
No, nothing,
how
nothing's, I don't think much is intuitive, especially
fair
when
enough.
you're 6 months out of college.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are way further along in their career, maybe several years, or maybe even more. I believe in what I call the law of immersion. When we decided to do this, we instantly joined the trade association for that industry, and I immersed myself in that
Mm,
trade association. And I attended local meetings, regional meetings, and I learned so much from attending those meetings that I never would have learned had I not. And I think a lot of people isolate themselves and they put their head down and they think they're going to grind it out. And everybody even hears those stories about people putting their head down and grinding it out. I don't believe in that. Go immerse yourself. Go hang out where other successful people are, because the people that are going to give you the best advice, the best encouragement, the best affirmation are highly successful people, because highly successful people aren't intimidated by other people being potentially successful. And I just got great ideas from being in that trade association, and great encouragement from being in that trade association. And so it was through immersing myself and hanging out with the right crowd that I learned a lot.
yeah. Interesting. On in terms of when you mentioned that other failure where then it ended up leading to the franchising model, was the franchising model something where you felt like was a pivotal point in the business that allowed you to then accelerate the growth? And if so, how long, you mentioned it took about a year to kind of formalize what
Yeah.
that was going to look like and then be able to launch it. But then even launching that kind of a program, how long did it take for that to kind of scale up?
Well, that would be like forever. I mean, this you're not, I guess, people hear the story now and it sounds like an overnight success story, but it
Sure,
wasn't.
of
Uh,
course.
um, so I went from being a distributor of printing and promotional products to being a franchisor. And again, let's get back to the law of immersion. I joined the International Franchise Association and I immersed myself
Mm,
once again. I wanted to learn all of the best practices about how to be successful. And when I talk to people, I encourage them to be what I call an ask hole. Ask questions, ask, be an asshole. And so ask for advice, ask for mentorship. So I called up one of the local franchisors in the Cleveland, Ohio community, and I said, hey, we're just getting started franchising again. Highly successful people are usually the ones that are most giving with time and advice and encouragement. And he said, sure, come on in. And he owned a company called Management Recruiters International, the most successful franchise in the recruitment industry. And we had a great meeting. And I think a lot of people talk about getting mentors and meeting with them. And I think, you're going to get 90% of the juice out of the first squeeze. Like, I mean, I just got so much out of my first meeting. I never really felt I needed to meet with them again. And at the end of our meeting, we met for an hour and I thanked him for his time. And he said, one more piece of advice. He said, don't sell dirt. So what does that mean? He said, don't sell territories. Now, in my mind, our business model was going to be offering territories. Like, because if you own a business in Cleveland, Ohio, and how much are you going to charge somebody in San Francisco, California for the area? $10.95. Like, who cares? Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
But he explained to me that they had territories, they had sold territories, and they had people in those territories that weren't optimizing the territories. And because they owned the territories, they couldn't force them
Mm,
to be more
interesting.
successful. And so that advice probably created a company that's worth 700 million in sales today annually instead of 70 million. Just
Very
one
interesting.
piece of advice. Be an asshole. Network, network, network.
Can you
And
dive? Yeah.
and so I got on the board of directors of the International Franchise Association. I had no business being on the board of directors of the International Franchise Association, but I got on the board and I started hanging out with some people. And one of the guys I hung around with was Fred DeLuca. Now, most people don't know that name, but Fred DeLuca is the guy that started Subway when he was 18 with a partner, and that's a long story. We won't get into it. And Fred would always say, hey, Greg, your business sounds interesting. We'd hang out after board meetings and go out for a couple of drinks after the board meetings. And he'd always ask if he could make an investment in the company. And I'd always say,
Mm.
no, we're doing fine. But it was nice being friends with him. But then one day, and sometime in the 90s, I bought out my partner.
Mm.
Okay, so um, most partnerships are going to fail. I don't know if you have that stat, but most partnerships are going to fail. So have a prenup before you get into it. Anyhow, we didn't have a prenup, but anyhow, I bought him out, but the bank didn't like the way I bought him out. And they told me I better find an investor or they were going to call the loan.
Mm.
So what I have to do, I called up Fred and I said, hey, Fred, remember when you used to always talk about making an investment in the company? Well, I think I need one now. And
Yeah.
so by being in immersion, not only did I get great ideas, great mentorship, but I found an investor at the perfect time when the company needed an investor. And without an investor, might have gone belly up. And so he
Mm.
put in enough money. And when people in the industry, the idea of franchising in our industry was new. Um, and I don't think we had much respect. But then when people heard, God, Fred DeLuca, the guy that started Subway, invested in this company, it gave us instant credibility
Mm.
also. And so it was to your point, pivotal time in the business. So yeah, that was a key moment for the company.
Yeah. Very interesting.
He's
Um,
he's passed away. He passed away 5 or 6 years ago. No
yeah.
longer involved in the business, of course. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Very cool. Um, as we're kind of rounding up on time here, would love to kind of get a better understanding of, you know, you don't have to do much probably anymore in terms of like validating yourself or in terms of like uh professional achievements. What kind of keeps you going at this stage of your life? And whether it's personally or professionally, what are you hoping to to achieve here, in the next chapter of your life?
Sure.
And what do you want to be remembered for?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, somewhere along the way, I found out that the business I was really in wasn't the franchising business, but was the dream business. I'm in the
Mm,
business of empowering the dreams of our owners. You know, the dream of owning one's own business is probably one of the most powerful of the top two or three dreams people have. And it's been a blessing for me to be able to see so many people become successful and come up to me at convention, $1 million club, and hug me and say, thank you. You changed my life. In fact, last year, 26 of our franchise owners, 26, made Inc. magazine's list of the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies, which is unheard of. In fact, they're in the process of writing an article about our franchise and affiliate program. But most importantly, my wife, who's now the CEO, way smarter than me, and I don't just saying that, is doing a great job running the business. I'm mostly helping in the business development team on the recruitment side, but but in addition to helping our owners achieve their dreams, my wife and I have 10 wonderful children, 13 grandchildren, and some of those
congratulations.
children and their spouses are in the business, and mentoring
Mm,
them to success is important to me. And then, my spirituality is humongously important to me. And I'm fortunate to have some time now to focus on what is this world really about? What is my life
yeah.
really about? And I'm just at a great season in my life. And I'm happy that I own the business because I never have to retire. I could never see myself like retired because I don't know what that means. So fortunately, I didn't stick with a CPA firm that forces you to get out at 62 or whatever,
Yeah.
and then you're out, like you're just done.
Yeah.
So I can do what I want to do in the business when I want to do it, and but but I'd like to get the business to $1 billion. My wife and I. Um, Along the way of bringing the kids and some of the hired guns. And I believe there needs to be a great mix of family and hired guns so that there's that rich outsider's perspective. We'd like to get the business to $1 billion in the process of bringing them all up to speed.
Amazing. On that note, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your journey, building up this nearly $1 billion business, and I'm sure we'll get there in the next few years to come. Uh, Super inspiring and just very informative in terms of, I think, a lot of the anecdotes that you shared about what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. So thank you so much, and congrats on so much of the success so far, and just wishing nothing but the best.
Thanks for your time. Great
Yeah, of
joining
course.
you.